Hey, on Flywire, we often don't review airplane accidents as they happen or very shortly thereafter, call it breaking news kind of thing. We usually don't do that. I like to have time to collect a little bit more data to see have a pretty good idea what really happened. And most of the time it takes some time for that to happen. This case, it's a little bit different, and it's an issue that's near and dear to my heart. So stick with me on Flywire. Hey, I'm Scott Perdue, and today on Flywire, we're going to talk about the Stearman accident that happened last Saturday. What was that? The 2nd of October in Winnie, Texas. This is an accident that's near and dear to my heart, and like I said, most of the time you got to wait for some data to be available so you can analyze the accident. In this case, we have video, and I think we can tell a pretty good idea of what happened. So stick with me as we go through this. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to run the video that got out there first, and there's another second video that shows it from a different perspective, and I think we're going to get a pretty good look at that. But before I start, I want to talk about a couple of things. You know, the initial reaction on the internet was, well, there's a lot of rampant speculation from people who they're just throwing out reasons, you know, what could be the possible reason that this could happen. And I heard a lot of stuff like fuel. It's a fuel issue. Well, here's the fuel tank right here. It's 44 gallons, and you can see where the filler neck is. And you can tell if you have fuel in the airplane. There's a fuel gauge right here that sticks down, and it's got a float that floats on the fuel, and it'll tell you just how much fuel you have. And as a matter of fact, you can see if there's any water in the tank, because that's the low spot of the tank. So now there is no fuel pump in these engines, okay, unless you have a 450 horsepower 985 version. But in Lycoming or the Continental version of the Stearman, there's no fuel pump, because it's about a 5-foot pressure head from the fuel tank here to the updraft carburetor at the bottom. So you actually get, you know, a couple of 2, 3, 4 psi, something like that, of fuel pressure at the carburetor, and you don't need any more than that. So the fuel feed is he's got fuel in the tank and the valve is open. Well, the engine was running, so the valve was open, and so it wasn't a fuel issue. Okay, there has been issues of carburetors, the needle valve sticking. A lot of people in Continentals, they call it the continental cough. And what the real thing about a continental cough is it's the needle valve that's sticking and leaving the intake to where it meters the fuel into the throat of the carburetor, mixes it with air. It leaves it wide open, and all that fuel pressure from this pressure head shoves a lot of fuel into the throat, and a lot of fuel gets to the engine, and it kind of drowns it for a second, about a half second or so. The engine will quit, but then it'll start running again. In some odd cases, and it's happened to me, the needle valve sticks and the engine quits because it has too much fuel. But you know, you can hear that. I mean, the engine quitting is a big deal, and we can hear that. And we're going to listen to that, and I'm going to talk more about the audio here in a second. So it wasn't a fuel issue. It wasn't the engine quitting. And it leaves you to speculate, you know, well, was it something like aeronautical decision-making? So we're going to look at this, so come along with me for the ride. All right, this is how the airplane looked during the parade. Looks pretty nice, probably a good way. And that's the first video. This is the light pole, and let's take another look at it as the airplane gets closer to the light pole. See, it's pretty much lining up with that lower left wing. And the next shot is going to be pretty significant. Bam, the light pole's moving, and the airplane's still flying. Its momentum is kind of up. There you can see not only is the light pole bent, but that looks like the actual light itself is broken off and falling to the ground. You can also see the cop cars blocking the road people real close, wires everywhere. Here's the lights and the wires holding the traffic lights. Just as the airplane approaches them, boom, hits those. There's throwing one light up high, the other one is disturbed as well. And then you can see the top left wing is bent now, and that's a result of the end strut collapsing. You heard in that video the engine sounded really good, no problems at all. Well, that's a picture of the airplane on the ground. Let's look at the other perspective.
Shit. Oh my God. Oh my God.
That was a pretty big movement during the takeoff roll, pretty significant, so let's take a look at that. The right here, the tail is up, the airplane's accelerating, and you can see the very end of the tail where the elevators are, and here he jams the elevators down, up, so he's trying to pull the nose up, and you see the tail hitting the ground. That actually hits it. I think it may bounce twice. Here's the airplane bouncing, and it doesn't really want to take off yet, but he's trying to force it in the air, and it starts to depart the hard surface into the grass median. And you can see there's a bit of a hill there. There it's departed onto the grass, and he's skidding it over. He's getting pretty close to, he's passing the Dairy Queen right there, and he pulls it into the air. Kept going. Gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. And here he's climbing. There, it's about as high as he gets right there, and you can see the light pole, pointing to the light pole right there. And then the next shot, bam, he's hit the light pole, and he's already started down. That's the second perspective. And here we go, by the Finney seafood taco joint, and by the Dairy Queen, just past the Dairy Queen, we pulled it off the ground, and then the accident itself. He had about 1,322 feet from the Finney seafood taco place. And then here, where he pulled it off the ground, he had a little less than 600 feet before he impacted the light pole. That's not an awful lot. There's a better picture right there. 576 it says, of course, I could be a little bit wrong. Let's watch it again. It's up and smooth. That's great. But now he forces the takeoff. You could just see the elevator jam, trying to get the nose in the air and get it flying. Got to get it flying because he's running out of room. He had no other options. There wasn't really an abort. There's all these cars and people into this runway. And all he had to go was 2 miles to the airport. Just tow 2 miles to the airport and everything probably would have been fine. Well, there you see what happened in the crash of the Stearman at Winnie, Texas during the takeoff roll. He attempted to get the airplane off, to horse it off, and the tail bounces and he skids off the road into the grass and then back onto the road, and he's airborne. Not enough time to actually climb above that light pole. When he hit the light pole, it hit right about in this area right here, and that what that did basically is it destroyed the end struts, and these wires right here are the flying wires and the landing wires, and they hold these two wings together as a box, and they're very strong until you take these wires out. And I think what happened is the light pole took these two wires out here and probably damaged the end strut. As you saw in that picture, that's all collapsed, and then the whole wing. Another picture we saw is the top wing coming down from the hinge point, which is right up here. That's the hinge there. That's where the top wing attaches. And basically it is like a hinge without the end struts supporting it and the flying wires and landing wires holding it in place. So that's what happened in that accident. I can't say that it's anything but aeronautical decision making, deciding to, instead of towing approximately 2 or 3 miles to about 3 miles to the airport for takeoff, there in a nice safe environment, he decided to take off on the road, and that was a disastrous decision. as we see. It's very lucky he wasn't hurt or killed or anybody else on the ground. There was no abort option really, but if he had any chance of stopping, it would have been right when he skidded off the road into that grass by the Dairy Queen, and maybe he wouldn't have been able to stop. But the cars and other things on the other side of the road was problematic, plus wingtip clearance on all those things that are hanging out around the road. That's what you don't, so what airports are good for is you don't have anything really close, basically about 250 feet. You know, there are some things that are a foot or two off the ground, but you don't have anything that you're gonna run into generally by an airport, runway. So that's what happened in this accident. It wasn't fuel, it wasn't an engine failure. That engine was sounding really good up until the time he hit the ground. And I think this is important about how accidents happen, and we tend to, we're people, and people tend to fill in the blanks if we don't know what the answer is, and we try to fit our concept of what fits the template of, okay, this is an accident, how did it happen? Well, it was a medical issue. He had a heart attack, and that's why the airplane went inverted and then plowed into the ground. Okay, what evidence we have for that? Okay, it might have happened, but there is no evidence. If there is no evidence, then you can't make that supposition. That's just one of those things that maybe we need to look into at a future point. So this accident in particular, the Stearman accident, we have video evidence, and we can tell pretty quickly, pretty definitively what happened and why it happened. It was a bad decision to take off, and then he horsed it off because he was getting nervous about those light poles getting closer to him in that intersection. He knew he had to get airborne before that, so he tried to yank it into the air. Airplanes don't generally like to fly when you yank them into the air, and I think this one is a perfect example, and a terrible waste of what looked like a really nice airplane. So I'm sorry to hear about it all. I feel bad for the pilot, but I think as a lesson learned for the rest of us pilots is remember what I said in the previous video, is don't do anything dumb, different, or dangerous. And I think this probably violated all three of those. So I hope you liked the video. I hope you learned something. I know I kind of did. And don't be in a hurry to put your spin on how this accident happened, because if you don't know, if you don't have any evidence to show you, then how can you make a speculation as to what the cause was? But if you have data, like the video data, I can say pretty definitively that this is the cause of this accident. This is what happened, this is how it progressed. So anytime you come up with a theory, the things that rule that decide whether or not it's a good theory or not are the facts, okay? And if your theory doesn't match the facts, well then throw out your theory and come up with one that matches the facts. He hit a light pole, and that was it. The airplane is not going to fly very long if you destroy the landing wire here, and this collapses, the whole wing's going to collapse. And you need wings on both sides to fly. Hope you liked the video. If you did, hit like and subscribe. It looks like this here. I'd also like to thank my Patreon supporters here. Without you guys, it'd make making these videos a little bit harder, and I appreciate it a whole lot. And I'll leave a link down below for the Flywire Patreon page if you'd like to support future videos for the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Flywire.